Hello there, everybody, and welcome to our review of Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 6. It is the finale. We are talking about the last episode of this show. This is the most anticipated Star Wars project for me since The Force Awakens, and I feel like for a lot of people, and it's now come to a close, and I'm very sad about that, but also I'm quite happy with what we got here. I think it was a very good show overall. We're going to dive into our spoiler-filled thoughts right now, but before we do so, please hit that like button down below, subscribe to our channel for continued Star Wars coverage. We will be continuing to do Star Wars videos throughout the entire summer until we get to Andor Bad Batch after. So it is a crazy year for Star Wars. You're going to want to stick around with Star Wars Lads for all of that. And then comment below, let us know what you thought of not just Obi-Wan Kenobi Episode 6, but the entire show. How'd you like it? We're going to give it a score here at the end after we talk about our impressions of Episode 6. So let us know what you would give it and what you thought of the entire show down below. So now to get into this episode, we had, if you watched our predictions and speculation, we had a lot of concerns entering this episode. We both loved last week's episode, but the Reva question, how is that going to connect with Luke? There was a lot of things that were giving us a little pause, especially with the rest of canon, and how is this all going to be done in a fashion that really worked. I think neither one of us really doubted the Obi-Wan versus Vader stuff. We all thought that would be great, and it was. I thought it was fantastic. I think we should start there because there's a lot of different things to talk about in this episode, not just a couple of cameos, but there are about three major plots in this. But luckily, a good chunk of this episode is Obi-Wan and Vader and the climactic duel. I really love this duel. I mean, obviously, with it's hard to compare it, and everybody's going to compare it to Battle on Mustafar, and rightfully so. But at the same time, this is a TV show with a TV budget with two guys. One's in his 50s, one's in his 40s now, and then also the characters are a lot older. They're filming it on a smaller studio in the volume. I thought the first part, I loved the whole thing. I loved the action. I was very concerned after like the first initial onset of the battle, because I was like, there's nothing around. It's just like an empty, desolate spot. Or hopefully they keep moving around. And I'm very happy with the way the battle progressed. The powers we get to see both of them use are just unbelievable. The fluidity and speed that both Obi-Wan and Vader are fighting with. I think this is the fastest we've ever seen Vader, at least in lightsaber combat. And it was just fantastic in all ways that a possible TV lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Vader could have been done. This was great. I think if it had a film budget, if it was filmed on a gigantic sound stage with different levels of blue screen and stuff like that, where you can make a Battle of Mustafar, where you can put them on platforms, when you can do this whole thing, it might have been a little bit crazier because it is a more contained fight. But at the same time, the one-on-one dueling aspect of this, I thought was absolutely fantastic. I thought they nailed it, and the budget that was saved for this episode was definitely worth it, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on the duel itself and just the actual, like, the action of it?
I think Deborah and the writers, they really put a lot of care into this episode. Not to say that they haven't with the rest, but like you said, I mean, episode 4, I still like it a lot. But that's because I'm a Fallen Order fan, like many. So coming into this episode, I was like, all right, well, that's gonna be a big chunk. How much is this fight really gonna take? And I've been rewatching the duels pretty recently too. So the Battle of Heroes, I guess, on Mustafar, it feels longer than it is because I mean, when the amount of distance they traverse, the locations of swinging on the spires, on the little floating platforms, and all that, like, yeah, it is truly like, if not a planet transversing fight duel, it is like at least a whole city mining area. It's huge. It's expansive. For me, I didn't ever want this duel to be bigger than what we got in that film, because not only do I not want to undermine that, but I think you still have to make some sort of transition into the more deliberate fighting of both fighters in A New Hope. But I think this actually did a good job of connecting to what I think the original trilogy just does better. That these duels are a little bit more battles of words necessarily instead of just spinning and striking in perfect flow and unison. Because look, they were battle trained, they were battle hardened throughout the Clone Wars, and it made sense for what that fight was. But by episode four, neither one of them is really conquesting or doing huge, massive fights. So it makes sense that they're wary and they're wary of each other because of things that supposedly happened between three and four. I always felt that there was an opportunity for this duel. And seeing this duel happen, not only did we get a lot of like the talking, the deliberate, kind of strike at each other with words, but we got a huge thing I think the original trilogy always did well was showcasing a little bit of the force too, a little bit of the acrobatics that made sense here and there, but wasn't excessive. Here we got to see a lot of the force. And we got to see Obi-Wan lift so many rocks. We got to see Anakin or Vader take the high ground and just bury Obi-Wan, block the lightsaber with the force, just all these different things, the spinning. I think one of my favorite things that tied back to three, but really emphasized where Vader is, at least in this moment, emotionally and all that, is that he's slipping so much further back into who he was on Mustafar because he literally just punches Obi-Wan. Like, he doesn't even, like try to hit him in the gut or anything, like kick his feet out. This is just a straight, like, sucker punch. And I was like, holy crap. And, you know, Obi-Wan is also, like, doing things that I think if you were a prequel fan and this was episode three, you'd be like, that's kind of weird. But for the fact that they're both older men, just doing what it takes to win this fight, like Obi-Wan hitting the butt of his lightsaber to break open the panel on Vader's chest, like those are things that I really appreciated. It felt closer, a little bit more grounded. Like it felt that like this was the last hurrah, and if one of them didn't die, there had to be some sort of emotional catharsis, and then we got that. We got Obi-Wan literally cutting open the mask, very much like Ahsoka, but this one was deeper because we see literally the cut in the ridge that we see in episode 5 when he's unmasked in episode 6. That you're always like, we don't really see that in episode 3, but here it's like, well, yeah, because Obi-Wan literally cut him like into his skin. See James Earl Jones's voice mixing in with Hayden, seeing Hayden's face, the back. It was creepy. It was unsettling. It was pure horror. And I think a lot of episode three's final fight, when Anakin's burned alive, that's just pure Star Wars horror. And to continue that a little bit more, but make it a little bit more psychologically disturbing, I think that was bravo. Like it wasn't just a physical thing, which I think the prequels get away with a lot. Like, oh, it was physically like acrobatic, it was physically this and that. But a lot of the original trilogy for me always works because it just hits you in the feels and the emotions and the state of being that you're in, and seeing that, the interpolling of the voices, just the details, and then Hayden smiling as he's like, Obi-Wan, you didn't kill Anakin, I did. And it's like he's just grinning, like he's just crazy, he's cuckoo. Like this is like the most unhinged Vader that we've seen, comics, whatever it may be. Like, yeah, like that was insane to me. They really did use the landscape. They used a huge spire. It looked like something like you'd see in like a 40s or 50s pulp sci-fi magazine cover. It just looked great. Like this was a setting that I really enjoyed, and they definitely used it. Just throwing each other into rocks, pushing Obi-Wan into like a barrage of rocks. Just yeah, it was just a brawl. It was a street fight. Like, no bars held. It wasn't anything about like swordsmen at their prime or, cautious kendo masters. It was just like just one man machine of rage and the other doing what it takes to keep Leia and himself alive. And yeah, I think on a second watch, this fight is only going to be better for me. I really loved it.
Yeah, it's easily the best fight in the Disney era, like by far. I think I think it surpasses everything from the sequels easily, and it surpasses Gideon versus Din, which is like semi lightsaber duel. In live action, of course, we have the Rebels fights, but like this is easily the best live action Star Wars duel we've gotten since Revenge of the Sith, and so it had to live up to that, and it absolutely did. I agree with pretty much everything you said about the environment. It reminded me of kind of Edu a little bit. Originally, that's kind of where I thought it was, but I don't know. They never really say. It is kind of just a generic rock planet, but they use the environment to its maximum, which I'm happy about because the sword
Yeah.
play, everything was great. The rocks, as soon as Obi-Wan backed Vader down, you knew the mask was coming off. And
Oh
I
yeah.
love the brutality of it. I love that Obi-Wan has the flash to Luke and Leia, and like really what his whole purpose is. We get all of everything. Love the high ground. This episode, by far out of all of them, does the best job of connecting our Obi-Wan's mentality and at least some of the things he believes. And same with Anakin and Vader to episode 4 from Revenge of the Sith. It has that nice transition. Obi-Wan leaving the fight, calling him Darth. Anakin placing the idea in Obi-Wan's head that Anakin killed Vader and or Vader killed Anakin, and rather than Obi-Wan just making that up and telling Luke, like there's a lot of things that are a lot more impactful now having watched this. And I think from that angle, we have to be grateful for this whole thing. I mean, there's definitely people that are going to pick this apart, and I don't really know why because I loved it. But the only thing I can say though is still like Obi-Wan could have finished Anakin off of Mustafar, and he could have finished him off here, and he still doesn't. And I still don't understand 100% why he doesn't do it. I feel like there needed to be like something that kind of separated the two of them rather than Obi-Wan just walking away. Um, that was my only little critique, and just kind of the logic flaw of like he didn't finish Anakin on Mustafar, and that made sense because I mean, who survives getting burned alive like that with losing 3 limbs? And also, he's emotionally raw from having to just absolutely obliterate his best friend, um, his brother. But now, after 10 years removed, seeing the monster he's become, realizing the change that he's no longer Anakin, he's Vader, he still does leave him alive. I think that transition could have been explained a bit more for me. That was the only negative I had about the whole fight. Other than that, absolutely loved everything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. Just the fact that I think just these last two episodes alone have not. I mean, episode three did a great job of showing Vader as this monster that we've all seen to some degree. He's choked out people physically with his hand and all that. But snapping the next, you're like, oh, like when push comes to shove, he will take it a step further, like 11 out of 10 Vader. And
Yeah.
this show really brought it. I mean, even in this fight where he goes to the ground, like forget about his fluidity. That was already wonderful enough to me. But then he goes to the ground and like how he breaks apart the ground with force ripples, pulling the ship out of the sky in episode five, part five. Yeah, I know everyone's been like the sequels have done this thing where the force scales of powers has been like you're like, whoa, this is like a little too much for me here. Like are they more powerful than Vader and Luke and all these people? No, I think they're still living in an era where, yeah, some of the force and skills of it have returned, but they're nowhere near the masters of the duelist era, so their dueling is not great. The force powers thing has always bothered me a little bit, and then this show has just completely made me like totally fair. We're like, yeah, they were just more prone to using the swords, but here we saw the Force and we saw Vader at a different level than anyone in this galaxy. It's just for that, I applaud Deborah Chow and the writer for ensuring that Vader not only got his fair due, but he broke the ceilings and expectations that I had for him.
Yeah, completely agree. I think they delivered on the Obi-Wan and Vader stuff, and I think when we talk, I think we'll talk a little bit at the end about our impressions of the show as a whole as we get to give it a score and kind of wrap up our entire thoughts on all 6 episodes, because I still think there are some missed opportunities in general, but I think from what they gave us, from what we have, and not things that I wanted or would change, I think everything here was great between Obi-Wan and Vader. Let's talk about the second plot, the plot that had us concerned, the Reva plot point, which wasn't really that big. And I think after kind of starting the episode and going through it, I started to be concerned very much so right when it started. And then as the episodes continued to progress, I was like, okay, I don't think this is going to be a problem because the episode didn't really focus on her and it didn't focus on Luke. It was a nice wrap up for her arc, I would say. It leaves a lot of questions that I think they must have answers to or must be planning something. Because personally, leaving somebody who knows Leia and Luke are Vader's kids, or at least Luke is Vader's kid, alive, seems still a bit of a stretch to me, especially when she's an Inquisitor, even if she's had a change of heart. But I do like, at least thematically, what they did here. I like that she can't go through with killing a child like Vader could, even if it is Vader's child. And that whole circle, I think it was a nice bow to tie on her arc. Now, it still does beg the question that we've been fighting off really this entire show of how important was this character to include. And I think going through the whole thing, I really enjoy what she brought about the Inquisitors and about, like, I was talking to my dad who doesn't know anything about Rebels earlier, and he watched this last episode with me, and he was saying he enjoyed all the stuff learning about her as a youngling and stuff like that. And I think from that angle, this brought a lot of the mythology about Inquisitors to the general public that don't really know the stuff that the people like us who have watched Rebels or have read the comics know about stuff, but I don't know what other purpose she really served. Now, I think they did a great job with her character. I think if we have more of Reva, I will be quite happy with what we got here. And I will like to see her story continue because I think she's set up to be a very fascinating character as we progress. Maybe somebody who is a pillar of the initial rebellion, somebody who is a pillar and maybe continuing what the path started and helping Jedi escape and continue to protect Force users because she had to slaughter a lot of children and people who were Force users just because they were Force users. And that was not really what she wanted. And eventually she'd become full circle. I think there's a lot of room for future for Reva that could be pretty special. I think there's a lot of potential for this character. Now, again, this was my least favorite part of the episode, though, because it just was the least relevant. It felt like it didn't really connect to Vader and Obi-Wan, really. And Obi-Wan just kind of shows up and the conflict's over. At least, we give him credit. We talked. Disney has continued to prove us wrong every time we're worried about canon messing with canon in at least like the biggest picture because Luke got knocked out during this whole thing, so he didn't really see much of what was going on. He probably has like vague flashes of some person chasing him with a red light, but he never was close enough to her or any of the conflict or seeing her or the lightsaber or anything to really mess with his innocence from A New Hope. So I think they handled that on a strong note. I love seeing Owen and Beru take charge. I love all that. I just think there has to be more for this character. Otherwise, I am starting to fall into the camp that I don't know if this character was necessarily this important to put in an Obi-Wan show, but I do think it is a good character. She is a good character, and I think she has a lot of potential for the future. But anyway, Sanak, what were your thoughts kind of on Reva's arc here and what they did with the whole Lars Homestead thing?
I mean, personally, if she was killed by Vader at the end of this episode, I think I would have been very happy with what they came out of it because she kind of serves to show just how, terrible of a peril it would be for her to just become like a Vader of sorts, or just killing these Inquisitors are all at the end of the day want to be Siths, want to be dark side users. And for the general public, you don't know what an Inquisitor is until you watch this show. And we love Rebels, but even Rebels doesn't really explain the Inquisitors. They're like, yeah, they're fallen Jedi, but we haven't really seen that angle. And I think I really appreciate the connectivity between the prequels and Rebels and this by showing Reva as a youngling, implied to be tortured, stabbed at least, becomes this Inquisitor. And then the fact that there's like these inter conflicts that always happen amongst these Sith users and Clone Wars and all that. But to show that, they're all kind of petty children with limited force abilities too. I think that really was a nice touch. Like we see the Grand Inquisitor can be caught off guard. Inquisitors, like you said, become a publicly acknowledged and understood thing. I think for me, the parallel of seeing that, like, Anakin can just kill these kids. Like the path that we see Anakin take in episode 3 is dark enough, but then to have someone who's trying to almost like trace his steps because she wants to, by doing all these things, she thinks she has the cover to then, hunt down Vader to kill him when the moment strikes, and then to finally, continue walking these steps of hatred, of surviving all that, and realizing, like, seeing Luke literally be swapped out, the young Luke kid with her youngling version, just a quick snap edit. I really love that, and seeing that, she can't do that, and seeing Vader's face and Anakin's face, like seeing the monster that he was as a human at the end and as a machine, like they're both already disturbing to her more than the average person is. Like, yeah, we see it as a Star Wars fan, like, oh, Anakin killing the Nemoidians and Mustafar, like, oh, this is horrible and all that. But being a youngling and seeing like the hero with no fear stab you, his face just twisting and contorting like a psycho Joker like madman, like that leaves even more of a scar than just a masked man. And I think we seeing that she tried to almost imitate his path, and then allowing these us as the audience to show like, hey, what Anakin did at the end of the day, not only was it dark, but it just can't be followed. It is so crazy and horrible. And a lot of that comes from the lifestyle that was forced on him, the things that he was limited by the Jedi, his hidden relationship, all these things that kind of coalesce, Ahsoka leaving and whatnot. But for him to take this much of a leap at the end of the day was on him. And no matter how much he was pushed into it, the, the, the depths that he went to are horrendous and dark and disturbing. So I think that's ultimately what her role is in this. Do I think it could have been more limited? Yeah, I definitely think it could have. I think we could have seen a little bit more of the broken Obi-Wan instead of Reva, just hunting per se. And I think that's where episode 4 could have, at least if we're going to keep that whole setting on the Inquisitors and all that, let her spend more time alone away from Leia as she's just feeling the consequences of the actions that she's doing to torture a kid and all that, instead of just the emoting that Moses does. And she kills it in this episode when she's like broken and leaves Luke in front of Obi-Wan and talks to him, just like how Obi-Wan cries with Vader, seeing her like let it out a little bit. I mean, Moses killed it performance-wise for me. It's especially these last 2 episodes, she just delivered. But I don't think I'm in the camp of like, maybe she wasn't worthwhile for this show. I think she served her purpose, to primarily be a parallel to tie everything together. Um, she's got a future, and a future that I didn't expect to have. I really wish she died at the end of the day, with her seeing her life and what it's come down to. I would have also appreciated her staying evil. She's more broken, not necessarily good or bad, but she's broken. She's unchained. I think now we maybe see her as like a video game character. I think we see her maybe Jedi Survivor. I love how Luke literally is scampering away and we doesn't see the light. While he gets knocked out from being dragged down with the Force, doesn't see the lightsaber. It was great. Like they really pushed it as much as they could, and then they're like, "All right, let's take a step back." And I appreciate that. But Reva, good, good to great. And I think, like you said, a character that's gonna be fascinating to explore even further. And a character I still think definitely dies in this dark time era, no matter what.
Yeah, I feel like she has to. And also, yeah, she finished off being a great character. I struggled to find an absolute reason they needed to parallel her with Obi-Wan. But again, I thought she was fascinating, and I think she will be interesting coming into the future. And that scene all worked really well. And I think it led to at least the reintroduction of Luke and Owen. It led to the end, and let's talk about the ending, because there's a lot of different facets to the ending. We have the wrap up with Leia, we have the wrap up with Vader's hunt for Obi-Wan, we have the wrap up with Ben finally meeting Luke, who knows him in episode 4, and we have the Qui-Gon Jinn reveal, which we were all waiting for. But I love the end. I thought the whole wrap up, and again, this is easily, well, besides Mandalorian, this is easily the best wrapped up Disney Plus series, and I think it doesn't feel rushed. This whole episode never felt rushed to me. I loved Qui-Gon. I loved the whole message of Obi-Wan not being ready for him. I think that is very clear from the first episode all the way to the last. I thought it was a solid through line, and I think it's something that makes a lot of sense. I like that. I like the way Obi-Wan and Leia depart. I thought all of that was very sweet. Leia is still, besides Obi-Wan and Vader, Leia is my favorite part of this whole show. I'm so happy that this actress was able to play Leia, and that we got this, because it was something I never knew I really wanted, was very afraid that we would possibly get, and ended up absolutely loving. I think I want I want Vivian Blair in everything. Like I want her to play Valeria Richards in Fantastic Four. I want her to be in everything. I think she's fantastic, and Leia is awesome. I love the way they wrap up Bail Organa, and I love Ben's meeting with Luke, of course, dropping the hello there. That was my probably the most excited, or the biggest smile got me in the entire show. I thought all of the like Obi-Wan stuff that they did in this episode was very natural. I didn't feel like anything was forced. The high ground with Vader, hello there, all of that type of stuff. I felt like there's so much thought and care given into the writing of Obi-Wan in this episode, and Darth Vader, but specifically Obi-Wan. I thought by the time it ended, I had gotten the finale that I was hoping for, like at least 90% of what I was wanting. And I thought the last 10 minutes or so that had kind of have Obi-Wan visiting a bunch of different places, walking around a bunch of different areas, wrapping up all the different arcs, worked quite well for me. What were your thoughts on the ending here? Also, Palpatine. I didn't mention that. I love Palpatine.
Yeah, I mean, just a joy, a happiness. Yeah, let's just touch up with the Palpatine Mustafar scene on Vader's throne. Already, the graphics of the landscape that we see through like the side look better than they did in episode part three. So that already kept me more focused and in it, and I could appreciate the. But as far as that little cameo, like I didn't expect that. That was my biggest surprise. He looks a little bit like the Rise of Skywalker. His eye bags are just, man. He probably got like a hologram call with Vader like at like 1 a.m. He's like, ah, come on, man, my bones hurt. I haven't been able to put on my powder. Just yeah, he looks a little old here, but I'm not gonna complain about. I don't know. I think the whole learner line, especially after this episode in A New Hope, really strikes me because last time, this time, I guess, as we're watching, Vader's the one approaching and going after Obi-Wan. In A New Hope, Obi-Wan runs into Vader. Vader is prepared. He's taken everything in stride. It's all about the battle of the wills more than it is about pure force power, because when push comes to shove, his master will triumph over him, because there's something more pure and genuine about him than the monster that he knows that he is. So I really appreciated that. I didn't expect Obi-Wan on Alderaan. It's nice that this man can see anything but sand and throughout the series and mud and whatever. Now he gets to see a beautiful city, and I think that makes the destruction hit a little harder for him too. Just Obi-Wan telling Leia the best qualities of Padme, the best qualities of Anakin, even after what he just went through with Anakin Vader. Yeah, I honestly, that to me is my favorite part because it's inspirational. It gives this girl who doesn't really know her parents, maybe a forced glimpse of her mother. She's got these qualities that she knows that she has, but she's being valued for it in front of her, right, by someone that she cares for deeply. Um, and that little discussion of like, will I ever see again? Yes, but we should really talk about this. Like, keep this quiet, keep this on the down low. I appreciate that too, because I know I mentioned like a little bit of a force rub, kind of make the memories a little foggy, but it's nice to see that Obi-Wan Kenobi, she's gonna respect that myth. But when Luke tells her, "I'm here with Ben Kenobi saved your life at the end of the day," and yeah, I love that touch. And then yeah, just seeing Qui-Gon. I was a little worried there at the end, like, are we not gonna see Qui-Gon? The hello there with Luke. I actually like the Luke kid not saying anything. I thought that was a nice touch because it lets Mark Hamill's performance that we see so much of when he's really the star of the original trilogy shine, and doesn't put the pressure on this kid to kind of match that. Whereas where Leia, she's supporting a main character, and her child itself doesn't really have much to say or a relationship. So this show really fulfills some of the things that we missed through Legends and whatnot. Never really was a Leia story like this. Yeah, just the great show. A little loose end still, Reva still out there, but I can forgive it because it's clear that they're going to do something with her. And I think Moses is a brilliant actress. I think she's going to kill it and be a large part of Star Wars moving forward.
No, I agree. I think Reva will have a future here. She has to have a future here. Otherwise, I think she should have died in episode 5. And I think because I thought, and I think that's going to transition us into our final thoughts on the show as a whole, because I think I loved a lot of what they did in episode 1, 2, and 3. Episode 4, now having seen the entire show, feels like an even bigger misstep than it did for me back then. I think it just doesn't do anything. It does nothing for us. We don't really learn much more about Reva, and we don't really learn any. I mean, maybe the only thing we really get is more about Tala. It's supposed to make us feel bad or like Tala more, so that when she dies, we feel badly for her. It gives us some more, stuff we already knew about the Inquisitors, but gives it to everybody. It gives us a look at Fortress Inquisitorius, but we've seen that before if we've played Jedi Fallen Order. So there's a lot of things that, like, I feel like that episode in particular was a big letdown because of the arc that's going on here. I really, really, really wanted to see more emotional, mental stuff with Obi-Wan, because he obviously has a mental hurdle that is blocking everything that about him and who he is as a Jedi in episode 3, and that's why he gets absolutely whooped by Darth Vader. And we never get to see him overcome that, and then he becomes the guy in this episode who's throwing 50 rocks at Vader and battling him and basically beats him again. So I don't have a problem with him beating him. Obi-Wan's my favorite character. I think he's the best Jedi ever. He should have won that fight in order for that quote to make sense with "I left you, but when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master." Obi-Wan needed to win this fight, but I wanted to see that mental transition. And I think for me, looking back at the show as a whole, I really liked 5 a lot, and I liked what they did there so much with the action, in particular with Vader and Reva and all of that. I liked the emotional beats with Reva herself and the flashbacks from the Jedi Temple. Loved everything about episode 3. Loved everything about 2 and 1 and the way that this arc was set up. And then loved this episode. It was just 4. 4 is the only one that stands out, and that's why I keep harping on it, because we could have done more with Reva in that episode. We could have done more with Obi-Wan in that episode. And I think in order to make Reva really stand out as at least like a parallel for Vader, more so than she did, like by rushing that arc a little bit in 5 and 6, I feel like either she should have been killed at the end of 5 and 6 left alone, or we get more about her and get that whole reveal in 4, which then carries over to the emotional beats with Obi-Wan himself, try to make Obi-Wan a part of her emotional arc, which then justifies her being in the Obi-Wan show a bit more. I think we needed a bit more connection in that regard. So to me, it's just like, I love this show. I thought it was great. I think it's definitely, for me, way better than Boba Fett. Better, I think, than Mandalorian season 1 for me. It's right around Mandalorian season 2. I think Mandalorian season 2 might have been better constructed overall, but I think this has a lot more highs for me. Like the episodes I love of this show, I think, are my favorite Disney Plus Star Wars episodes. So it's tough. It's tough when rating it, but overall, I think episode 4 was the thing that definitely drags it down. But I think if we're giving it a score, I think I'm still going to give it a 4 out of 5. I really like this show a lot. I thought it was quite great in the end. And man, maybe on another binge, like a full rewatch. I've watched every episode twice, except for this new one, obviously. Maybe on a binge watch, I might like it even more. But I just still think episode 4 just sticks out like a sore thumb for me and drops the rating a bit. But what were your final thoughts and rating for the show as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your whole point that either she dies in 5 or you expand her more in 4 to justify this ending of 6 a little bit more than it is. I mean, she does get the short end of the stick because at the end of the day, this has to be Obi-Wan and Vader. And because Leia is like the role of Grogu, but a walking, thinking being, right? Instead of just a plot device, she takes a huge chunk of that. I agree. Four was used a lot for Tala and to show off the Inquisitorius during Inquisitorius, and rest in peace, Wade, the best Star Wars character ever. I think a big chunk of that issue could just be easily resolved if you add another 5-10 minutes. Really, it's the shortest episode in the series, and it's a fun little navigation exploration of the fortress, seeing the depths of it with the stored Jedi. There were great touches and details to it, but you couldn't have spent 5 minutes with those initial glances that we see of Obi-Wan just traumatized after that fight. Definitely could have spent 5 minutes of there. And you could have split some of those 5 minutes or added another couple. No, you don't even need 5 minutes. I think you need 2 or 3 minutes with just Obi-Wan, right after he's right before or right after he's coming out of the back tank. And then a couple interspersed and spliced, like we have seen throughout the show, of these little moments and feelings um, when he's navigating through the whole fortress where he thinks on Anakin or he thinks on Leia, he thinks on everything, and then when he gets finally to the depths, he gets like a flashback to maybe seeing these characters that he sees dead, like maybe he sees like a Terra Sanubi or something in the library, like just a quick glance of something like that, maybe seeing himself a little happier, or Anakin or Ahsoka or whatever, right? I think that would have just justified his mental escape more. And I think especially if he had a little bit of a spliced moment like we see in basically every episode, where he sees this like whole family or congregation of these Jedi, then that gives him that little bit of a oomph to like, oh my god, I have to do this for them. Like this is horrendous. Like it's already horrible enough, but now they're just trophies and like kept forever for research and all that. Like that, and then contrasting with just 2 minutes of him at the beginning of the episode, or maybe a moment later after he lands and sees all this, like that would have worked really well for me. And then you just give 1 or 2 minutes to Reva to really begin what we see a lot of in five. Um, Again, Moses, like I said, is emoting a lot of what she's feeling throughout the show, her unease and all that, but she's not really one of them. But even on my rewatches, I really enjoyed 1 and 2 a lot. Two definitely really builds this relationship between Leia and Obi-Wan quite a bit, and one is just a classic, great setup there. Um, Three, I don't love the Bapuzo setting, and that's my biggest critique because it is literally just Joshua Tree. But in Star Wars, I think a little bit more architecture and landscapes, maybe extending the checkpoint so that you could have just walked around it, right, instead of making it a little longer would have helped there. But other than that, I mean, just the first Vader encounter I thought was handled quite well. I just wish it was a little bit more unique looking. Everything about five was perfect, other than the mass flood of stormtroopers just on being unable to hit anybody, just unless point blank. Fix that up a little bit, and a little bit of the shaking cam I thought was a little in that episode. But six was perfect in every way for me, other than just the Reva stuff, how it ends. Like I want her story to continue immediately now. Like I need this to be part of Survivor or something animated or whatnot. Like I don't want a spin-off show with her. I think there's not enough of her, that's been built up to justify more than an episode or two of her in live action. But yeah, I mean, these last two episodes fixed so many of like the negativity I felt around the fandom and just with myself with the show that I was totally ignoring, totally was happy with for the first three, but four made me go like, like I have to be defensive here, maybe for no reason, all this and that. Five and six just restored my faith completely, and it was touching. I think whilst Mando season two has maybe a better season finale, technically, visually, all this and that, and an emotional beat, it's more of like a yeah, we did that mic drop moment versus here it was like that was beautiful to see. That was beautiful to see Ewan cry and transition into the beginning of the Sir Alec Guinness version. Vader doubled down, Leia, all these characters, Breha, Owen, all these. It was there, and it all worked so well for me. One dangling loose string that gets addressed for sure in the future does not make this finale fall apart on itself for me. So at the end of the day, yeah, I would say because of these final 2 episodes, I'm giving it a 4.25. I really liked it. I guess if we're gonna rank the seasons of Disney Plus Star Wars shows that we've gotten so far, this is just a tad under Mando season 2 for me. At the very bottom is Book of Boba Fett. As much as I enjoyed a lot of it, it's just quite a bit of lows, and Mando taking over still leaves me with a bad taste. Mando season 1, I think it's a little overrated at this point. It was wonderful watching it, but I think people really forget about 4, 5, and 6, those episodes being so disconnected. Then after that, it's obviously Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan is knocking on the door of Mando season 2. And I think that what keeps it just below Mando season 2 is that the Mando show can work being episodic. He is a bounty hunter. Every day is a different experience for him. This is a more of a serialized show where everything is like one big movie. That's where 4 is the thing that kind of weighs it down. And it really just needed a little bit more of an extended runtime to fix a lot of that. But they're really neck and neck for me. Mando season 2 just happens to have Luke Skywalker in it and Ahsoka Tano, and that's, no matter how much I love Obi-Wan, that's hard to beat. That really is.
Yeah, I guess if I was to rank them too, Boba Fett is by far my least favorite of all of the live action Star Wars shows. Probably all of the Disney Plus Star Wars shows as well. It's by far my least favorite. And then Mandalorian season 1, I've been on the train that I think it's overrated since it came out. It's good. It's really good. And for our first live action Star Wars show, I'm very happy with what it is. And I think it's a solid piece of Star Wars entertainment, but I don't find it better than most of the Star Wars films. And a lot of people treat it like it's like the Holy Grail. It's good. It's good. I really like it, but I think season 2 is a huge step up in every way. And that's where it's really tough to rank Obi-Wan with all 3 of those other shows, is because all of those are very episodic, like you said. And like Mandalorian has its down episodes. It has its episodes that feel like filler, or it has its episodes that are side adventures. But Obi-Wan is one continuous story all the way through. And then just on top of that, the fact that this is my favorite Star Wars character of all time, the expectations that I had coming into this, the story in my head that I've had for 15 years that I've wanted to see, coupled with what we were getting, all of that comes into play. And I think that's where, like, when you have a down episode like 4, I think it feels even worse for me than maybe it actually is. And with time and with another binge watch, this show very well could be my first place, because I think it's very close to Mandalorian season 2. Because, like I said, the highs of what it does for characters that I already love, like Obi-Wan and like Darth Vader and like Princess Leia, are some of my favorite Star Wars stuff we've gotten in the Disney era. But it's does have its flaws, and they're easier to see in a serialized show than they are in an episodic show. When you have an episodic show and you're expecting every week to be a different adventure until you get to the finale, then those problems in its story structure don't feel as prevalent as it does with a serialized show that every episode is supposed to be building off each other. So it might not really be a fault of Obi-Wan as a whole. It's just the type of show versus the type of show Mandalorian is. I don't think Mandalorian season 2 is significantly better than Obi-Wan Kenobi, but I would probably put it as my first place as well right now, purely because we didn't know those characters. We didn't know what was going to happen. And there's something about not knowing the future and then having moments like the Luke Skywalker moment or the Ahsoka moment happen, and then you're just absolutely stunned, versus we always kind of knew the end game of Obi-Wan Kenobi. We just didn't know how it was going to get there. It's part of the prequel problem as well. But I did end up loving this show. And 5 of the 6 episodes for me were great to amazing. And I think this it definitely lived up to the hype for me. But let us know down below what you thought of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Was episode 6 your favorite? Which one was your favorite? Rank the episodes if you want to. Rank them with the rest of the live action Star Wars shows, or all of the Star Wars shows under the Disney Plus era if you'd like. Let us know down below what you thought of this show and what you thought of this episode. If you haven't yet, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. We'll be putting out a ton of Star Wars content for you over the last couple of years since we started our channel. We will continue to do so into the future. We have a lot of interesting creative ideas to come this summer as we bridge the gap until Andor starts and we get back to doing our reviews and our predictions and speculations. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.